Welcome to Adu Globe. Discover new ideas, learn exciting things, and be amazed every day. Russia launched its so-called Grand Summer Offensive with promises of overwhelming success. But instead of rapid gains, the reality has been brutal losses, stalled advances, and fading momentum. What was meant to display power now raises doubts about whether this offensive has already failed before it truly began. United 24 Media, Ukraine's official communication platform, immediately dismissed Russia's so-called victories. Instead of major advances, United 24 reported that Russian assaults ended with heavy losses and little to no progress. By using this source, the video grounds its story in Kyiv's official voice, showing that Russia's optimistic claims were more fantasy than fact. Later, the Ukrainian General Staff echoed this message on its Telegram channel, stating that Russian operations were collapsing, not advancing. Their post described Moscow's breakthroughs as mere propaganda to mask catastrophic losses in troops and equipment. By combining United 24's media report with the General Staff's military briefing, the video paints a united front. Russia's offensive is failing, and Ukraine is calling them out with evidence. From January 2025 up to August, Ukraine's reports claim Russia has already lost nearly 210,000 troops. That equals a staggering monthly average of around 26,000 men, wiped out in less than 8 months. These aren't just numbers, they represent the scale of exhaustion eating away at Russia's fighting strength. Every figure shared by United 24 and the General Staff is intended to show not only the reality of battlefield destruction, but also the unsustainable pace of Russian losses. For context, in all of 2024, Russian troop losses were estimated at about 434,000. If the current trend continues, 2025 could come dangerously close to matching that figure in just a single year. By putting today's numbers side by side with last year's totals, the video underlines a painful reality. The so-called Grand Offensive is devouring Russia's manpower at a record pace. These statistics serve as hard evidence, giving weight and credibility to Ukraine's narrative. The toll isn't just about soldiers, it's about the machines of war being shredded. Ukrainian reports say that since the start of 2025, Russia has already lost more than 2,100 armored vehicles and over 1,200 tanks. Imagine the financial and logistical strain: billions of dollars in steel and firepower reduced to twisted wrecks on the battlefield. Each destroyed tank is not just metal, but a symbol of Russia's faltering momentum, unable to secure the decisive breakthrough it promised. The losses don't stop there. Ukraine claims Russia has seen nearly 7,300 artillery systems destroyed, alongside 157 multiple launch rocket systems (MLRS), the very backbone of its offensive firepower. Artillery has always been Russia's pride, its so-called god of war. But when thousands of guns are silenced or blown apart, that advantage turns into a glaring vulnerability. The battlefield balance shifts, leaving Russian forces less capable of sustaining the relentless bombardments they once relied on. And then comes the Kursk region, where armored columns have faced not just destruction, but devastating ambushes. Ukrainian counterstrikes there have reportedly inflicted both heavy equipment damage and significant casualties. By tying equipment statistics to regional battles like Kursk, the narrative highlights a wider picture. Russia is bleeding not only manpower, but also the steel backbone of its war machine. Without both, sustaining a prolonged offensive becomes nearly impossible. On August 12, President Volodymyr Zelensky publicly underscored the scale of Russia's mounting losses. Referencing official reports from the day before, he highlighted that Russia had suffered thousands of daily casualties across multiple fronts. Zelensky framed this not just as statistics, but as evidence that Moscow's much-hyped summer offensive was burning resources at an unsustainable pace. His words gave weight to Ukrainian claims, turning raw numbers into a political and strategic message. According to the August 11 figures, Russian forces lost significantly more troops and equipment in a single day compared to Ukraine. This daily breakdown painted a clear contrast. While Ukraine absorbed heavy hits, Russia was losing men and machines at a scale that raised doubts about the viability of its offensive. By using official daily tallies, Kyiv's leadership grounded its narrative in measurable comparisons, proving that the cost for Moscow was far higher than it admitted. Dr. Jack Watling from the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, emphasized that Russia's Grand Summer Offensive was never purely about territorial conquest. Instead, its underlying goal was to create leverage for future negotiations. By inflicting pressure on Ukraine through concentrated assaults, Moscow aimed to sit at the negotiating table in a stronger position. This insight reframed the offensive not as a military victory in progress, but as a political gamble wrapped in military operations. Watling further noted the importance of timing. Labeling the assault as a summer offensive signaled urgency. Russia needed quick results before momentum and resources ran dry. This meant their strategy hinged on achieving visible progress within months, not years. By highlighting the time-bound nature of Moscow's plan, RUSI's analysis showed that Russia's strength was less about durability and more about short-term pressure to reshape political outcomes. According to reports from BBC and Reuters, Russia outlined two key objectives during the offensive. The first was the creation of a buffer zone around Sumy, a region in northeastern Ukraine. By pushing Ukrainian forces back from the border, Moscow hoped to shield its own Belgorod region from recurring drone strikes and cross-border raids. This move was framed not just as territorial expansion, but as a defensive necessity meant to protect Russian soil from constant disruption. The second target, as highlighted by BBC analysis, was Pokrovsk in Donetsk Oblast. Capturing Pokrovsk would have given Russia logistical advantage by threatening a major Ukrainian supply hub. Located at the crossroads of critical transport routes, this city was seen as a potential gateway for Russian forces to press deeper into central Donetsk. For Moscow, Pokrovsk was not just a tactical gain, it was a symbol of momentum that could reshape the map of the Eastern Front. However, despite intense fighting, Reuters confirmed that both goals, the Sumy buffer and the Pokrovsk advance, remained unfulfilled. Instead of achieving decisive breakthroughs, Russia's forces faced stiff Ukrainian resistance and mounting losses. These setbacks revealed the gap between Moscow's ambitions and battlefield realities, reinforcing the broader argument. The so-called Grand Offensive failed to secure its most crucial objectives, leaving Russia politically weaker rather than stronger. During this phase, Russia claimed it had already secured vast security zones inside Ukrainian territory. State media echoed narratives that Ukraine's missile production had been crippled by so-called precision strikes, portraying Moscow's offensive as not only defensive but technologically superior. The message was clear. Russia wanted the world to believe its campaign had delivered irreversible strategic damage to Ukraine's infrastructure. But Ukraine quickly dismissed these announcements as exaggeration. Kyiv pointed to continued missile activity, including the Flamingo missile system, as proof that production and capability were far from destroyed. By contrasting Russian boasts with visible Ukrainian counterexamples, officials framed Moscow's reports as inflated propaganda rather than battlefield reality. The clash of narratives highlighted the information war running parallel to the fighting. On August 16, in the northeastern region of Sumy, Ukraine launched a powerful counterattack against Russian forces. Despite Moscow's efforts to fortify its positions, Ukrainian units advanced and forced the Russian military to retreat by nearly 1.2 miles. This wasn't just a small tactical win, it was a statement that Ukrainian forces are not only capable of defending their ground but also of launching offensive maneuvers to regain lost territory. The operation became even more significant when reports confirmed that a high-ranking Russian general was killed during the battle. His loss disrupted Russia's chain of command and weakened morale among frontline troops. Meanwhile, several Russian soldiers were caught in tactical encirclements, forcing some to retreat chaotically while others faced capture. These concrete battlefield outcomes directly challenged Russia's narrative of dominance and revealed cracks in its operational control. For Ukraine, this wasn't just a military success, it was also a narrative victory. Ukrainian officials highlighted the retreat and the general's death as proof that Russia's security zone claims were exaggerated. This fits into the so-called Tempest narrative, using verified battlefield incidents to disprove propaganda and boost confidence both domestically and abroad. The story wasn't about numbers on paper but about real, visible setbacks that Moscow couldn't deny. The counterattack in Sumy carried a wider message: the war cannot be won through propaganda alone. Russia aimed to establish a buffer zone, but the Ukrainian pushback shattered that plan. By seizing the initiative, Kyiv showed the world that it can still dictate momentum on the ground. The events of August 16 proved that Ukraine isn't just surviving, it's capable of flipping the battlefield narrative in its favor. In Pokrovsk, Russian forces managed only a brief incursion, creating a narrow salient that quickly collapsed once Ukrainian troops launched counter-closing maneuvers. What seemed like a potential breakthrough turned into a trap. Infiltrators were cut off, some eliminated, and others forced to retreat under pressure. Instead of holding ground, Moscow's forces found themselves losing momentum in a fight they had hoped to dominate. Reports now indicate Russia has deployed elite units to the Pokrovsk sector, a desperate attempt to compensate for earlier failures. Yet, despite these reinforcements, the summer offensive has not secured the city. The geography of Pokrovsk, with its limited approaches and fortified defenses, worked in Ukraine's favor, turning Russian infiltration into costly setbacks. This episode underlines how strategy and terrain can outweigh manpower. The fighting around Sumy and Pokrovsk did not just shape the battlefield, it also echoed on the global stage. According to ABC News, former U.S. President Donald Trump expressed frustration during talks in Alaska with Vladimir Putin, signaling that Moscow's lack of tangible victories left the Kremlin with little leverage for a ceasefire deal. What Russia hoped to translate into negotiating power instead turned into diplomatic weakness. Analysts stress this point. Battlefield losses don't remain confined to the trenches. They ripple outward, undermining Russia's political credibility and shrinking its influence in international talks. Without decisive wins, Putin cannot offer a ceasefire from a position of strength, making Russia appear reactive rather than dominant. The war's failure to create leverage exposes how military outcomes shape global diplomacy. Military experts like Pavlo Lakichuk emphasize that Russia's failure in Pokrovsk can be traced to one fundamental weakness: it could not achieve a full encirclement of the city. Analysts note that Moscow's operational blueprint aimed to cut off Ukrainian defenders by surrounding them, forcing either surrender or retreat. But only a fraction, roughly 10% of that plan, was ever realized. Instead of tightening the ring, Russian advances stalled, leaving open corridors that allowed Kyiv's forces to reinforce and regroup. This failure was not just tactical, it was structural. Russian forces captured several small settlements around Pokrovsk, but they struggled to hold them under constant Ukrainian counterattacks. Each gain was temporary, erased within days or weeks. Experts argue that this revolving door of capture and loss exposed severe gaps in Russian logistics and planning. Instead of building a stable perimeter, Moscow was bleeding manpower and equipment while gaining nothing permanent. According to Lakichuk, the encirclement attempt's collapse also shows a deeper miscalculation. Russia underestimated Ukraine's ability to sustain counteroffensives. While the Kremlin expected exhaustion, Ukrainian brigades rotated efficiently, maintaining pressure. The result was a scenario where Russian forces found themselves not surrounding Pokrovsk, but being gradually pushed back from their forward lines. Taken together, the Pokrovsk operation illustrates why Russia's broader campaign faltered. Without encirclement, without sustained control, and with mounting losses, the grand strategy unraveled into piecemeal actions. What was supposed to be a decisive turning point became a glaring reminder that partial success is no success at all. Analysts now describe Pokrovsk as one of the clearest examples of how flawed execution can nullify even ambitious plans. One of the most overlooked yet decisive failures in Russia's campaign was its inability to execute river crossings. Strategic rivers like the Dnipro and Oskil became natural defensive walls for Ukraine. According to Forbes analyst Vikram Mittal, bridges were not just pathways, they were lifelines. Once Ukrainian strikes destroyed or disabled these crossings, Moscow's entire supply chain fractured. Without reliable routes, moving heavy equipment, ammunition, or reinforcements became painfully slow and dangerous. Russian engineers attempted makeshift pontoon bridges, but these efforts collapsed under Ukrainian drone strikes and well-placed ambushes. Footage showed repeated failures, temporary crossings destroyed within hours, sometimes while troops were mid-transit. This exposed a fundamental weakness. While Russia had manpower, Ukraine had precision, and rivers became traps instead of gateways. Each failed crossing didn't just waste time, it cost lives and left units isolated on vulnerable banks. The failure to secure reliable river crossings cascaded into larger setbacks. Without bridges, Russian forces couldn't maintain momentum or hold their positions effectively. Logistics collapsed, and isolated forward troops became easy targets for Ukrainian counterattacks. What seemed like a simple engineering task, crossing a river, turned into a decisive factor that reshaped the battle. Analysts now argue that this failure highlights how modern warfare punishes armies that underestimate logistical details. As the transcript reaches its close, one final detail stands out: an assessment from the Center for Strategic and International Studies (CSIS). Analysts noted clear tactical level shifts in Russian behavior. Instead of launching massive assaults that defined earlier stages of the war, Moscow is now opting for smaller, probing maneuvers. This adjustment reflects mounting losses and a recognition that large-scale pushes are both costly and ineffective against Ukraine's evolving defenses. CSIS concludes that this shift is not just tactical, it signals a strategic slowdown. Russia appears less confident in sustaining broad offensives, focusing instead on conserving manpower and avoiding catastrophic losses. While this may extend the conflict, it also underlines a deeper weakness: the inability to project overwhelming force as once intended. For Ukraine, it means the pressure remains, but not with the same ferocity that marked earlier months of fighting.